on my note cards. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. So, over 3.5 million Americans are currently living on the autism spectrum. So it's more likely than not that you know someone who's either indirectly or directly affected by the autism spectrum disorder. And so today I'm basically going to address what the autism spectrum disorder is and what I mean by the autism spectrum disorder, and basically the history, how it affects the people that it affects, and some treatments and assistance that are kind of involved for people that are on the spectrum. So according to Encyclopedia Britannica, the very first case of autism ever diagnosed was in 1943. So it wasn't until 1980, which is quite a while, quite a long time, that it was added to the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders. So it was added as infantile autism in 1980, and then 7 years later, with a new version of the DSM, it was changed to autistic disorder. So it wasn't until 2013, which is pretty recent, that previously separated autistic disorders were now lumped together as the autism spectrum. So instead there's no separate disorders, and it's all one big spectrum with varying severities and symptoms. So that was in the very latest DSM, so 2013, and according to the CDC, 1 in 68 people, or children specifically, are diagnosed with autism, and this has grown in alarming rates recently. So what does it mean to be on the spectrum? How does it affect the people that are affected? Basically, like I said, it is a spectrum, so there's a wide range. There's no clear-cut, this is what autism is, and this is the spectrum. So it's a large, varying things, varying severities, and varying symptoms. So according to the National Institute for Mental Health, there are two main types of behaviors that are associated. So there's restrictive and repetitive behaviors, and there's social communication behaviors. So restrictive and repetitive behaviors are repetitive, unusual behaviors, or overly focused or intense interest in certain things that are different than things that other people are interested in. Like instead of a toy car, maybe a child on the autism spectrum is interested in the wheel instead of the car itself. So that's why it's a very specified interest and very intense. So communication behaviors, the social communication behaviors can range from anything. It could be inconsistent eye contact, completely nonverbal. It could be echoing words that are heard, so repetitive words, and any kind of out-of-place behavior. So there are other difficulties too that are associated that aren't really symptoms, but they are just kind of people on the spectrum are more prone to these things. So that can be things like light sensitivity, hyperactivity, anxiety, depression, sleep disorders, insomnia, and things of that nature. So with all of the bad things that are associated with being on the spectrum, there are also a lot of good things. People on the spectrum are prone to excelling in certain subjects like math, science, music, and art. And also, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, over 50% of people on the spectrum are actually above average IQ. So they definitely can be a lot more ahead than the other people of their age in certain areas. So because it's not always negative, there isn't a cure for autism or for being on the spectrum, but there are certain risk factors that are known to kind of be more likely with someone who's on the spectrum. So it could be age of parents during the time of the child's conception. It could be the gender of the child and the genetics. So knowing these things can help to prevent having a child on the autism spectrum, or can also just help for early diagnosis so that the child on the spectrum can be given the same opportunities and is able to excel in the things that they are good at. So there are therapies and treatments out there to help them get better at things that they're bad at, or really strengthen the things that they are good at. And so there are some medicines that are given. It's not a medicine or a cure for being autistic. Moreover, it is a medicine for the difficulties that are kind of associated. So it could be hyperactivity. You could have medication for anxiety, depression, sleep disorders. So there can be medicine prescribed for those specific symptoms. And that's basically all you need to know about the autism spectrum disorder in a nutshell. So with over 3.5 million Americans alone affected by this disorder, it's definitely something that we should all be aware of, as it's really growing in diagnosis rates. So I hope that what I've helped you or brought to you guys' attention today will help you to be aware and to help people that might be on the spectrum. So thanks for listening. Here's my cards again. And then show it.